We'll cover NASCAR moving the All-Star race to Bristol. What does this mean for the racetrack ahead? Plus, Formula One gonna race on an almost oval in Bahrain. How would that look like? MotoGP, they're looking to come back. How will it affect the grid defending champion? That and more on Grid tonight. Hello, everyone. Joe Samaniego, Kobe Lambeth. Welcome to Grid tonight. We're going to pretty much start with the latest coming out of NASCAR today.
That's right. The talk on Monday morning was about Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, but that little feud doesn't feel significant at all in comparison to the big news that the NASCAR All-Star race will be taking place at Bristol Motor Speedway instead of Charlotte, plus an escalating rivalry between drivers Denny Hamlin and Corey LaJoie. And today we're going to start with the Hamlin and LaJoie rivalry. So, according to Corey LaJoie, Denny Hamlin threatened to wreck him on purpose at Homestead and messaged team members at Go Fast Racing, warning them of what could potentially happen to the number 32 car in the future. And apparently, this little situation got so bad that NASCAR executive Steve O'Donnell had to step in and intervene. And obviously, Hamlin came back later on Twitter to deny these allegations. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on this whole crazy situation going on between Corey LaJoie and Denny Hamlin?
I'm honestly surprised at how it has really escalated. We all know this sort of started a little bit back when a tweet was put out about the difference between a good car, good driver, and how much is the driver, how much is the car, in which Corey LaJoie felt like Denny Hamlin was a bit disrespected. Essentially, we've seen afterwards in Martinsville, that feud grew when Denny Hamlin, along with his teammate Kyle Busch, fell a lap behind. Corey LaJoie was still ahead, and so they didn't get their free pass. We saw some more Twitter activity where Corey LaJoie said, "Well, they should have been ahead of me," escalating that. So I thought everything was sort of put aside. So for me, this was sort of a surprise to see this come back, and then to hear how it had really escalated to where Steve had to step in. That's really something else.
Yeah, Joe, it's really crazy. I had no idea that Denny Hamlin and Corey LaJoie had such a significant feud going on. I mean when they were had the drama at Atlanta, they're talking about the heart rate or whatever. I honestly did not know whether or not to take that serious or not. I didn't know if they seriously had issues or they were just joking around, but I guess it turns out to be serious. And to me, if these allegations are true about Denny Hamlin threatening Corey's car owner at Go Fast Racing and other members of the team, if all of that is true, that would definitely not be a good look for Denny Hamlin at all.
Definitely, I would agree. It wouldn't be a good look for Danny Hamlin, especially a lot of corporate sponsors. FedEx is a really one of the few sponsors that's there all year long for him, compared to like Keselowski, where he just even lose him Miller Lite likely at the end of the year. So really, you're hitting a lot of good points with that.
Oh, absolutely. This is definitely a little rivalry that we'll have to watch moving forward, and it would definitely be the icing on the cake if Cora LaJoy somehow found a way to win this weekend at Talladega and beat Denny Hamlin, and is definitely a story that I'm sure that we haven't heard the last of. And moving on, Bristol Motor Speedway and Charlotte Motor Speedway are obviously both owned by SMI. In the past, there's been talks about relocating the All Star race. Every All Star event has taken place at Charlotte Motor Speedway except for the year 1986 when the race took place at Atlanta Motor Speedway. The move was made in response to the rise in virus case numbers in the state of North Carolina. In addition, the ARCA race has moved to Kentucky out of Charlotte as well. Bristol will also have fans attend the race with the capacity capped at 30,000 and the total capacity is 160,000, so the fans will be able to socially distance there. And reflecting on last week, we covered the situation at Ace Speedway in North Carolina, Alamance County, and asked, can a short track safely operate with fans in attendance? And my question for you, Joe, do you think NASCAR had no choice but to move this event out of North Carolina? Or do you think there were other factors in place as well, like the package situation on the mile and a half tracks probably not producing as much exciting action on a short in comparison to a short track?
Definitely, those are a couple of good examples that you put there. I know the aero package that we are seeing in the mile and a half ovals is not exactly producing the best race. And I know in the part of the reason why we've been seeing more increase in let's change the all-star rate location has been because of the package, the lack of racing. We've seen a few years ago they brought in an option tire, a soft tire to try to make it see if that make the racing a little bit more interesting. But definitely I think the big determining factor was the number of cases going up with the virus situation in North Carolina. North Carolina is one of a few states that's seen a really big increase, and in the amount of safety, it seems like that was becoming more of an issue. So definitely, I think this is something NASCAR was sort of forced to do for the safety to make sure this was to keep going. We know they had a little issues earlier with the governor of North Carolina waiting to be reopened, including doubting about the Coca-Cola 600 prior to the event. So I do think NASCAR was a little bit in a tight spot. The nice part, of course, for SMI, which owns both speedways, it was just more of a lateral transfer rather than losing a day at an SMI facility and it going to essentially another facility that's owned by NASCAR.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely have to keep a watch out on this situation. And although I know we're months away from the playoffs, we'll we'll have to watch the case numbers in North Carolina because if NASCAR pull out of Charlotte because of the escalating number of virus cases, what's going to happen when they're supposed to go back to Charlotte for the Roval race? Like what would NASCAR do? Are they gonna cancel the Roval, or move it to another venue? But it's way too soon to tell because we have no idea how the state of North Carolina is going to be doing with the virus when it's late September, early October, around Roval time. And in the past, there have been discussions and debate about moving the All Star race to different venues, but no changes were made. So with Bristol hosting it next month, does this now open the door for future All Star races to take place at different venues?
I think it definitely does open the door for different venues to host the All Star race. In the past, it was just something where it's at Charlotte, all the teams are there. This is something for all the teams, families to go really enjoy a short night of racing compared to the Coca Cola 600, which will be the following weekend. And it always seems something like almost like a tradition. A lot of times, traditions are a little hard to break. But with this pandemic situation, we're seeing a lot of changes just being made just to try to get the number of races in, trying to get fans if possible. So it's really unique because I felt this has allowed the opportunity for the All Star race to move to Bristol. And going forward, it could easily open the doors for other venues saying, hey, if we want to host the All Star race a new change for the NASCAR Cup Series schedule, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens going forward if this does allow it.
Oh yeah, you know what the All Star race been a non-paying event. I mean a non-points paying event, all for the money and no bragging rights. What kind of night do you think the fans should expect at Thunder Valley next month?
Oh, it's going to be a crazy night. I know a lot of folks have talked about in the past when there was the debates about should the All Star race move, and people brought up Bristol. A lot of people said it's a one groove track. It'd just be bump and runs all night long. Now it's still a little bit of a one groove track. That higher groove does come in later in the night. I could almost imagine the folks at Bristol are going to put that PJ1 on the bottom groove to get that going. You're going to see that top groove go on. And I think it's going to be really physical racing, especially if you have I almost said the Winston Open, but the All Star Open race where drivers without a win get a chance to race in. I could really see essentially somebody put in the bumper on the last lap, last corner to try to get into a transfer slot and be in the All Star race.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's gonna be a crazy intense race. I really like to see NASCAR, mess around with the All Star format here, and instead of having everybody, like want to race in the last little while, be locked in. I like to see nobody locked in for the All Star race and do what they did with I believe it was the iRacing Pro Invitational Series or whatever. Well, I believe it was the Saturday Night Thunder where they had like all non-cup drivers get together back during the shutdown. And I think if you just let them go out, let whoever enters the All Star race, how many cars there are, go out, run one hot lap. That's your qualifying time, and however fast you are, that's where you're gonna start in the heats. Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting if we could have heat racing, and then go through all the heats, and then you'll have a last chance qualifier. I think that would definitely bring a lot of intensity to the All Star race. With the last chance qualifier, and then it's at Bristol, baby. That's crazy, right? If you told me before 2020 that the All Star race would be at Bristol, I would have just like got on my I would laid on my back and I would start laughing. This is crazy. This just seems so surreal that the All Star race is going to Bristol of all places. But I'm definitely not complaining because it's one of the more famous short tracks on the NASCAR schedule. And here's my question for you, Joe. How would you feel about the idea of NASCAR experimenting with this All Star race, like adding a choose cone, which is famous for like picking lines on the restarts in the short track community, or even experimenting with the heats and the last chance qualifier?
Definitely, it's a good opportunity to experiment around. We saw not too long ago with prior to the current air package, they used the All-Star race one year to try to taper spacers, to reduce horsepower, the bigger spoiler, and created a lot of buzz. A lot of fans had a positive reaction to it. So with the choose cone rule, this is the perfect event since there's no points on the line. Opportunity for the qualifier race for somebody that's a little further back, but prefers to go ahead into that bad restart line, gain some positions, make it a little interesting. So it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of changes NASCAR will introduce. This is a unique circumstances where different track, we could try a different format, different rules, and then depending on how everything goes, even start implementing it for 2021.
I definitely agree with what everything you said. We'll have to see what NASCAR comes up with when they make the rules for the All Star race. And switching gears now, yesterday the NASCAR Hall of Fame announced the three inductees for the class of 2021. The three lucky winners were Dale Earnhardt Jr., Mike Stefanik, and Red Farmer. On behalf of Joe and I here on Grid Tonight, we want to congratulate these legends and their families for this huge accomplishment. Now that we know who will be entering the Hall of Fame next year, do you think the voters got this one correct, Joe?
I do believe the voters got this one correct, especially now that we're getting to the point where we got drivers such as Red Farmer a little bit up there in age. I know Mike unfortunately passed away already, but then Dale Earnhardt Jr. He's very still connected with the fans, a very big presence, and even did the Xfinity race last weekend. So I think it's a really good class where we got a lot of both generate multiple generations, including the latest generation that is Junior Nation.
Oh yeah, and speaking of Dale Earnhardt Jr., on social media, I noticed some comments from fans questioning if Dale Earnhardt Jr. was truly deserving of being a first ballot NASCAR Hall of Famer. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has won 26 Cup races, claimed two Daytona 500s, won two Xfinity titles. He's won multiple Xfinity titles as a car owner at JR Motorsports. He's a 15-time winner of the Most Popular Driver Award, and he started a broadcasting career with NBC. In addition to speaking out on some issues that a lot of people wouldn't feel comfortable talking about as a true ambassador of the sport. So after listing some of his many accomplishments, why would anyone find a reason to discredit Dale Earnhardt Jr.?
I think part of the reason why some folks try to discredit him coming in is they probably forgot about what he has done prior to the Cup Series. I know he was in the Xfinity Series full time 2000s, 1999, 1999, 1998, rookie season 2000, already 20 years ago. I can only imagine a lot of new fans started coming in, especially once 2001 rolled in, NASCAR on Fox, NBC. Of course, we all know what happened in 2001 Daytona 500 that really threw him in the spotlight. And a lot of people thought championships, uh, much more wins, all sorts of success for him. Didn't really pan out, just all sorts of factors from what was going on at DEI, going to Hendrick, changes. I mean, and all the pressure he has being an ambassador of the sport. I think that's why a lot of people sort of discredit him initially. But when you look at especially the number of wins, the drivers that have more wins than him, only one of them is not in the Hall of Fame yet. The others that aren't in are active drivers, but all the retired drivers, they're already in there except one. And then drivers with less wins, there's still Davey Allison, Alan Quickie, they're both in the Hall of Fame. Less wins. Harry Gant, less wins, but he's known as Mr. September, the oldest driver to win a NASCAR race. We have Jeff Burton. He has a couple wins less than Dale Earnhardt Jr., but he was a big ambassador for the sport, as well as being very vocal about sports safety and advancing the safety. So I think he's a really fair winner, done a lot for the sport, including bringing up topics that some people were more quiet, didn't want to talk about. So I truly believe if they got it right, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. is worthy of being in the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
Oh, absolutely, Joe. I agree with everything you said. I think Dale Earnhardt Jr. does he doesn't have anything else to prove. He in my eyes he's definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer, and apparently a lot of the voters thought the same thing because Jr. received 76% of the vote, which was the most of any nominee for the class of 2021. The other inductees, Mike Stefanik, earned 49% of the vote, and Red Farmer earned 71% as the pioneer nominee from that era. Unfortunately, the likes of Neil Bonnet, Ricky Rudd, Carl Edwards, and Herschel McGriff will have to wait another year. Do you think NASCAR made the right decision to switch to three inductees per year instead of five like it's been in the past?
That is where I feel mixed. I know this year being only three is like, okay, it's a smaller group, but I know longevity, making sure we always have pretty good classes for folks, especially I could think of like one of the Harry Gant, he's getting up there in age. I think a lot of folks would like to see him be present to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Ricky Rudd, he is definitely somebody that is worthy of being in the Hall of Fame as well too. And Carl Edwards, who you mentioned, who is the one driver that has more wins than Dale Earnhardt Jr., but is not in the Hall of Fame yet. That might be something for next year, but definitely it's something where I'm still a little on the fence. I did like the five people per class. Three, it feels like was a little. I just felt like it was like they could have done four if they really wanted to change from the five, but I'm still a little bit mixed on it.
Oh, yeah, I definitely had mixed feelings about that as well. And I think a lot of people were saying like adding five per year that the Hall of Fame would get watered. I've heard the term watered down a lot, and I've seen a lot of people who have actually been in favor of switching to three per year, but also at the same time, like you mentioned, like some of the people are getting up there in age and they're not going to be around much longer. So and we definitely want some of the older nominees to get in while they're still here so they can be honored for what they gave to the sport all of these years. And as you mentioned, it's very unfortunate that Mike Stefanik won't be here to see his induction ceremony. And something that I was wondering, like, if is Carl Edwards, early retirement going to hurt him because Carl Edwards, he walked away in what you can argue the prime of his career. Carl Edwards, when he was fighting for a championship when with Joey Logano, when he ended up crashing at Homestead. And we thought Carl Edwards was coming back the next year because a lot of people are thinking Carl Edwards looked really strong. He's going to come back next year. He's going to contend again. And I think we were all caught by surprise when Carl Edwards announced that he was retiring because I I don't know about you, Joe, but I never imagined Carl Edwards' last NASCAR memory, been a crash at Homestead, and that was it, and no more NASCAR as well.
Yeah, I agree. It was something where I still remember that morning waking up, getting a text message that Carl Edwards retiring, and I was so confused. And then we all saw the press briefing. I recall Carl Edwards made a little fast joke, but then got into it seriously that he was done. And a lot of folks are factoring in what they contribute to the sports along with the wins. I could recall, I believe it was the second or the third class, some folks thought Cale Yarborough was snubbed from being inducted right away. And some folks pointed out to some of his disagreements he had with NASCAR early on in his career. So it might be something where it might affect Carl going into the Hall of Fame for a short time, but I do think I won't be surprised if he eventually gets in there. So
Yeah, I definitely expect Carl Edwards to get into the Hall of Fame at some point. I don't. Maybe it might be next year, or it might be years down the road. But I'm just wondering. Have you seen like Dale Earnhardt Jr. Has remained an ambassador of the sport even in his retirement from full time driving. Dale Jr. Stays active and he does stuff in the sport. And this is no way trying to discredit what Carl Edwards has done. Carl Edwards definitely had a very successful NASCAR career. And, Carl Edwards is a very private person, and once he retired, Carl kind of just fell off the map, and we haven't really heard him. We haven't really heard much. I remember seeing him talking about being a nominee online in an interview, but mine is that's just about the only things I've seen from Carl Edwards, and I'm wondering if voters in the future will take in the fact, and wonder, be like, is Carl Edwards gonna continue to be an ambassador to the sport, or is he, or has Edwards just completely walking away?
Yeah, those are all questions I think a lot of folks have, including myself. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Carl Edwards going forward. I think a lot of folks will want to know how his conversation went with Chip Ganassi after Chip needed a replacement driver. Speaking about a driver who is just like how Chip Ganassi went from Indy cars as a car owner to NASCAR as a car owner, one exciting news that came out, racing veteran James Davison is going to make his Sprint Cup, excuse me, NASCAR Cup Series debut at Talladega Super Speedway, driving the number 77 Chevrolet for Spire Motorsports. Kobe, did this announcement come as a surprise to you?
Absolutely, man. That announcement was straight out of left field. I had no idea that James Davison was gonna be running a NASCAR Cup Series race. I mean, he was supposed to run the Daytona 500 with Rick Ware Racing, but apparently the sponsorship fell apart for the Great American Race, and Davison in general. He was supposed to have like such an amazing year, running all of these crown jewel events. I believe he did run the Chili Bowl, I believe, with Bird Racing, and I think he was also supposed to run the Daytona 500, the Rolex 24, the 12 hours of Sebring, the 6 hours of the Glen, the 24 hours of Le Mans, the Petit Le Mans. A lot of the crown jewel races this year, and when the shutdown happened, I'm sure it definitely threw a wrench in all of those plans. And Davison, going back to the Rolex 24, he was supposed to run the LMP2 car with Rick Ware Racing as well, but that entire program fell apart at Rick Ware Racing, and Davison was left without a drive. And I think that was like really the first sign that the Daytona 500 wasn't going to work out for him. And I do find it quite interesting that he's going to make his very first NASCAR Cup start for Spire Motorsports at Talladega this weekend.
It is going to be very interesting seeing him in Talladega with Spire Motorsport. Of course, Davison is a five-time Indianapolis 500 starter. His best finish there was 12th place. He also has four NASCAR Xfinity starts on his resume, scoring the best of fourth at Mid-Ohio in 2017. In addition to that, he also has IMSA SRO America competition experience. Some fans are concerned about him going from no cup experience to all of a sudden making his cup debut at the track known for having the big one of the most feared tracks, Talladega. Are you a little concerned about James Davison coming into this high level of stock car racing at Talladega?
I mean, I think I want to say yes and no, and I'm gonna start by telling you why I think we shouldn't be worried about Davison, because his resume speaks for himself. He's competed in some of the highest forms of racing in the world, and he's raced the Indianapolis 500 5 times, and going into turn one in Indy at 230 miles per hour, it definitely takes talent to hold on to those Indy cars. They're really fast, and if you crash one of those things, it's gonna hurt. And and Davison, he certainly has the credentials, and he is quite a talented, diverse driver. So I don't think that that's a concern. But the reason why I would be worried about him making his Cup debut at Talladega is because there's like nothing to my knowledge that James Davison has like ever like tested a Cup car or whatever, and there's not going to be any practice as well this weekend. There was originally supposed to be practice, but they decided to cancel it because the teams felt like that they would be ready. And it's going to be interesting to see James Davison get up to speed in a NASCAR Cup car without having any practice beforehand. And honestly, I think it would be beneficial if Spire Motorsports and its representatives were able to put Davison in an ARCA or an Xfinity car, just to get some extra experience handling a stock car in the draft. I mean, he does have stock car experience on a road course, but he's never driven a stock car on an oval track, and it's definitely going to be different watching him at 200 miles per hour in the pack at Talladega Super Speedway of all places.
It is definitely going to be different seeing him in Talladega in the pack. One of the things it sort of reminds me of, I believe it was in 2007 or 2008, Jack Villeneuve for Bill Davis Motorsports qualified, got front row, maybe the pole, and there was concerns that he had no experience, a fast car. He elected to start in the back. I got an idea if for some reason Davison was to shock the world and get a front row starting position, he might do something similar to stay out of the way and just mainly gain that valuable experience. Now, one thing I know we've been talking a lot about NASCAR, a little bit about everything from the All Star race, the feud, James Davison. Going back to one change we're going to be seeing that's going to look really different when the All Star race comes around is the cars. Of course, NASCAR announced after they announced about the All Star change, the change to the cars coming, in which, as you see on the screen, the number's going to go from under the window at the door area slid back a little bit to open up more space for sponsorships. It's not as drastic as a number moving to the quarter panel, but it's definitely got Twitter all over buzzing about this and people talking about what they think about sharing their opinions. Some folks are really against it, some folks are for it. What are your initial thoughts when you first heard about this coming out for the All Star race?
I mean, I didn't really like have an opinion one way or the other. I mean, NASCAR is planning to do it, and if they're going to do it, we just have to accept it. I mean, there's a lot of things that a lot of people did not like, in terms of changes that NASCAR made. But over time, people just learned to live with it, and it's something that they just forgot about over time that it didn't even bother them. But but I will say, if although this will be something brand new for all of the viewers to see, for the teams, having a number in a different spot, if it's going to open up more opportunities for sponsors to come into the sport, then I think it might definitely be a great move. But I must admit, it'll definitely take some time for me personally to get used to the number in a different spot, because I've always known the number to be exactly where it's always been, and understand a lot of people aren't really open to change, but it seems like NASCAR is definitely down with trying something, and there's no better place to try out something new than the All Star race. It seems like the All Star race has kind of become an experimental race in recent years.
Definitely, it seems like it's become an experimental race from different packages, different rules. Now, this different format for the car numbers. One of the things we know, some drivers like Jimmy Johnson, they have Ally all year long. Denny Hamlin, FedEx all year long. But then there's teams out there like Corey LaJoy, even Brad Keselowski, different paint schemes over every week. A lot of folks associate their driver branded with their car number. With a little bit of a smaller car number, do you see that becoming an issue where it could hurt their brand when the fans really see more of the different sponsors and the numbers up slightly smaller?
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's just something that we just have to test and see what happens. I can't really say one way or the other if it's gonna hurt their brand or not. It's just something, it's something you just have to try it and see what happens. And I've checked out some of the renderings that on Twitter, and some of the paint schemes, with the number in a new spot. It actually doesn't look bad, but with some of the renderings and the sponsor, it just doesn't look right. Like with Chris Buescher's number 17 Roush Fenway Racing Ford Mustang with Fastenal, I saw that rendering, and it looked perfectly fine. And then when I saw Denny Hamlin's rendering with FedEx, it looked way off to me for some reason.
Yeah, seeing some of the renders has been something where a lot of folks got to see them. Some didn't look really great, as you mentioned. Some didn't look like something's off. It's going to be really interesting once we start seeing the actual cars with the new layout. Now, one sport where the number is almost hidden all the time is Formula One. Formula One is set to return July 5th at Austria, but the biggest title that came out this week was Bahrain and the potential of hosting a second race and using what Ross Braun calls an almost oval course. This almost oval course, also known as the outer ring, highlighted in black on the screen, is a proposed second race date for Bahrain if they need it. What makes this really interesting is essentially with this track layout, it'll be smaller. The second smallest, only small track smaller to it is Monaco. So one of the big things, of course, they also discussed was the lack of downforce. So it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of race if we have something similar to the old Hockenheim track with the minimum downforce. How big of a challenge will this be for the teams? And is this something the teams are welcoming under these unique circumstances?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, I definitely think that coming up with an almost all oval track in the opposite direction, it should definitely be something new and exciting for Formula One fans. I'm sure the teams would have to come up with, I'm not sure, well, maybe a unique setup for this certain layout. Maybe look and see what they did at Monza. Since it's gonna be a low downforce event, and and definitely there should be some drafting with some DRS zones. I think they mentioned they're gonna have three DRS zones for this potential layout, and not just Bahrain in general. Considering like what's going on with the global pandemic in the world, some of the other races might not be able to happen, and places where Formula One can get to, they actually might have to create separate layouts if it's possible at those certain tracks, because we saw Formula E is going to finish their season at Berlin. The final six races of the current Formula E season are going to take place in Berlin, Germany, and they're going to run on multiple different layouts, so they're not going to be running the same track every day. And it'll be interesting to see if Formula One is going to have to go down the same path with the different layouts on their current circuits.
Definitely, especially Bahrain does have potential. Once again, just doing a quick look at the track map, you can see all the different varieties of directions, course options they have. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Formula One does. Now, with Twitter, we did ask fans what was their thoughts on Formula One running on an almost oval course. Overwhelmingly, fans approved it. They seem to be excited about this. If fans are allowed to go back to the track, is this going to be the big hot ticket event for the Formula One year?
Definitely, because this is something that we haven't seen in Formula One. Although it's not what you would consider your traditional oval track where you're going you're going counterclockwise. It's different. It's different because this will be a clockwise almost oval, and I definitely think that this might be a must see event, especially if they're gonna have three DRS zones where they'll be able to open up the rear and gain extra horsepower, and they'll be able to make some easier overtakes.
Yes, Formula One, of course, returns back July 5th with racing. That is the same weekend as the IndyCar and NASCAR doubleheader at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championships also returns to action at Daytona International Speedway as well.
Yeah, MotoGP will also begin on July 19, marking the return of two-time defending Grill Ranking World Motorsport Champion Marc Marquez. The series was the first to postpone events due to the pandemic situation in Europe, where most of the events are held. This year, MotoGP will be shown on the NBC Sports Network in the United States. Currently, they have 13 events with dates this season, the minimum needed to crown a world champion. So with these unique circumstances, and a shortened season, could this affect the way the grid ranking scores MotoGP this season?
Definitely could affect the way the MotoGP season scored. Of course, with the grid ranking, each race completed is worth so many points. So if a driver goes out there, wins more than half the races, that's great. That's a lot of points. But of course, if that season is shorter, that means the points they earn will be a little bit higher. But if it's something like Formula E, where Formula E usually has 12 races 8 different winners last year, we see them fall down the standings. One of the big things with the grid ranking is dominating and trying to consistently stay in the top 5 as well.
Yeah, Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas usually hosts MotoGP, but that race has been postponed, and they're still hopeful to get it rescheduled for later this year. Do you really see MotoGP coming to the United States in 2020, given the number of escalating virus cases in Texas right now?
It's really hard to tell. It doesn't look that great right now. Of course, MotoGP, they do have the set number of races they need to do. They would love to come to the United States, of course, television markets. This year, MotoGP will be on the NBC Sports Network as well. So it's a great chance for American fans to be introduced to the sport and then hopefully go to the race in Texas as well. So I know they're going to be trying their best, but it's just going to be one of those circumstances we're going to have to see what happens with the pandemic and everything.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I think it's a little too soon to say whether or not MotoGP is going to come to Circuit of the Americas or not, because a lot can change between now and later in the year. Texas could start doing better with the virus cases, or it couldn't. But obviously, trying to get a season in, the people who are in charge in MotoGP, they might be pressured to make a decision soon. And if they can't have a clear answer, they might just have to pull out and decide to return to Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas in 2021.
Definitely, yeah. It'll be really interesting to see what happens with Circuits of America 2021, and then of course all the series as well. So it'll be really interesting what all occurs.
Yeah, and we have another feature story by my colleague Tara Jones at the Podium Finish. Her latest article is titled Beyond the Track. Rich Mar Flores features Jonathan Morisi, co-owner of Rich Mar Flores, which is his family's business. Check out Tara's story if you're interested in learning how Mr. Morisi, who was given tickets in 2009 to Pocono Raceway and went from simply being a spectator to pursuing sponsorship opportunities in NASCAR around a decade later. The link is provided in the video description.
Definitely, we encourage all our fans to go ahead check that out. Links in the video description. Of course, always visit thepodiumfinish.net as well. Speaking about opportunities, what's this rumor that we started hearing about an opportunity for a new track in the Cup Series?
Oh, yes, speaking about opportunities, race fans near Road America may have the opportunity to see a NASCAR Cup Series race at Road America soon. Rumors picked up after track management then denied the possibility of Road America hosting a Cup race. Joe, what would the addition of the road course, one of the most famous road courses in North America, Road America, what would the addition of that track mean to the NASCAR Cup Series?
Definitely, it will be a really exciting addition. Road America is purpose-built road course. I think a lot of fans in the past, when they want a new road course, the general reaction when the Roval was introduced was, "This is great, but it's not a purpose-built road course." I do feel Road America especially has the experience from hosting Indy cars back even when it was kart for the longest period of times. The fan seems really engaged, and then the Xfinity Series racing there is always something else. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, for Cup to go up there. It'll be interesting to see what time of the year, of course, because in the road courses there is the option of rain cars as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the Cup Series decides to start doing for 2021.
Yeah, people have been talking about NASCAR needing to add another road course race to the Cup Series schedule. Do you think the addition I mean, the potential addition to Road America to the Cup schedule would endanger any of the current races at Sonoma, Watkins Glen, or the Charlotte Roval?
I don't believe it would. I mean, the only way something could happen is if it was something similar to what we're seeing this year, where because of the pandemic, Sonoma is not going to have a race. But of course, Sonoma is part of SMI, so that day is going to another SMI track property. That's the only way I could see if something was to happen and Sonoma has to lose a date, it will go to another SMI track. But I feel NASCAR, the fans overall, they're happy with what we have with Sonoma. Watkins Glen is always a good track, and the Roval has been just almost nonstop predictable of a race where but really drivers are even like it's one of the more intimidating tracks. And then you throw in Road America. I think that's a good 4 tracks for a 30 race season. I think that's a pretty good number.
Yeah, and as you know, Road America currently hosts IndyCar and Xfinity races. Do you think there could be a potential someday for an IndyCar NASCAR doubleheader at Road America?
Roger Penske, I bet, is probably already trying to see if he can make that work. The big thing, I guess, will be can Road America have the space, the capacity for all those series, Indy cars, I assume probably the Xfinities, and then NASCAR Cup Series. It'll be really exciting. The fans will love it. And I think that will definitely put not only that weekend on the map, Road America on the map as one of the premier venues in the United States. And it's just going to be a matter of the capacity. I know a lot of fans will want to see that.
Oh yeah, I definitely think if NASCAR Cup Series and the IndyCar Series can have a doubleheader at Road America, I definitely think it would definitely be a hot ticket on the schedule, especially if we can find a way to get some crossovers in that event, like have a NASCAR driver go and run the IndyCar race at Road America, and vice versa, have an IndyCar driver come run NASCAR. Like imagine from the IndyCar side, let's say Simon Pagino, Penske currently has 3 Cup cars, and they would be able to field an open entry if they wanted to. As a fourth entry, imagine having Simon Pagino, run his typical IndyCar ride at Team Penske, and then come over and run a Team Penske Cup car alongside the full time Team Penske competitors. That would definitely be an interesting sight to see. And also it sounds like Jimmy Johnson might be, although he won't be full time in Cup next year, he might be running with Arrow McLaren SP next year, sharing the car with Fernando Alonso and Jensen Button or whoever they put in that All Star car that they're planning to run next year at McLaren.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see next year. There's so much potential. It's just a matter of what's all going to happen. One of the big things, of course, we all heard that's coming out is Formula E is going to have 6 races in essentially a 9-day span. Here's the schedule for everyone back in Berlin. It's just something where 9 days, starting with August 5th, ending up to August 13th, they're going to crown a champion. This is really good because this will get them the race numbers that they need and will fulfill essentially the desired dates that they originally planned. I guess one of my big questions, how hard is that going to be? We're not talking about 1 or 2 races a month now. We're talking 6 races in 9 days.
Oh yeah, that's definitely gonna be a lot, especially if these drivers aren't racing in other categories that have restarted beforehand. Like some of the Formula E drivers that they haven't been behind the wheel of a race car since Formula E was forced to put the season on pause, and to do 6 races in 9 days. That after being away from the car for so many months, that's definitely going to be a lot to ask. But I think these drivers are more than capable up to the challenge. Finishing the final 6 races of the season on the streets of Berlin, and I give Formula E a lot of credit for coming up with several track layouts because I'm sure the fans would not want to see a Formula E race 6 days in a row on the same track.
Definitely just having the same course being used now. Of course, Formula E has a very unique qualifying system where they're broken down into groups depending on where they have in the point standings. We now also have, besides championship implications, we're going to essentially have 2 new drivers somewhere, one covering for Daniel Appseed and one in the Mahindra. Of course, Pascal Wehrlein could end up possibly on a seat somewhere as well too. When it comes to that Formula E race, especially the first race, as unpredictable as it is, do you see where the championship is just going to be again wide open, or do you think it's going to again be sort of where we see the cheetah, which seems to be pretty good with Antonio Felix da Costa, sort of ahead of everybody? Could he stay up there ahead?
Well, honestly, I think they're in this little short time period. The teams are gonna have to find chemistry and find it faster in like maybe the first one or first 1, 2, or 3 events because in 9 days, the season's gonna be over once they get started in Berlin, And I think given how long they've been shut down, the championship might be wide open, especially if those currently at the top of the board are having some struggles, or make like careless mistakes or get caught up in somebody else's mess. I definitely think once Formula E starts back, people are definitely going to want to tune in and see what happens.
Definitely, people will be tuning in and see what happens. I know it's just very interesting. It's like about a few years ago, the concept of a doubleheader weekend seemed very foreign. IndyCar introduced it, worked well in Detroit. NASCAR, of course, is introducing it this year in Pocono pre the pandemic. And now we're seeing just about every series looking at some form of a doubleheader. So definitely, we're going to be something we'll be following. Of course, be sure to follow us. We're on Twitter at Grid Rankin and Grid underscore WML. We also have our website, gridrankin.com, and a brand new TikTok at Grid Network. And be sure to visit Kobe at thepodiumfinish.net, as well as Tara's piece and everybody's great work over there. On behalf of everyone here and for all our listeners out there, we wish everyone a good night. We'll see you all Sunday for Grid Live pre-race Sunday before the NASCAR race at Talladega. It'll be on YouTube, Periscope, and the Ultimate Sports Radio Network. And we'll see if we could break the tie in to pick a winner, both for the grid and on Twitter. We wish everyone a good night. We'll see you on Sunday.